In January 1991, the eyes of the world were in Vilnius, where Lithuanians stood up against Soviet repression. After the nation had declared its independence, its capital was stormed by Soviet tanks, which as it turned out was not enough to make the nation capitulate, and so Lithuania would be the first domino to fall, breaking up the Soviet Union. Despite currently being a small nation, Lithuania has consistently punched above its weight on the international stage. Whether it is in standing up against Moscow's actions in Ukraine or showing solidarity with Taiwan in the face of China's aggression, Lithuania has proven its commitment to defending the principles of freedom and self-determination. So what is the history that gives this tiny nation a big voice? What were the pivotal moments which brought down the Soviet Union? And how is Lithuania standing up in the struggle between authoritarianism and liberty? Let's roll. This is Lithuania. It is approximately 65,300 square kilometers. This makes it the largest of the three Baltics, and slightly larger than West Virginia in the United States. It has a population of 2.7 million as of 2023. The country is predominantly urban, with 71.1% living in cities, and the major cities being Vilnius, Kaunas, and Klaipėda. Its capital, Vilnius, in particular, is packed with fantastic medieval architecture and history. The ancestral Baltic tribes of these lands primarily lived by practicing agriculture, animal husbandry, and fishing, with the dense forests providing resources like timber and foraged foods. They resided in villages and occasionally fortified hill forts, organized into clans or tribes, characterized by pagan religious beliefs, seasonal celebrations, and trade. Lithuania as a unified political entity likely emerged out of a need to defend against Teutonic attacks, a German medieval military order which arrived in the Baltic region to spread Christianity and colonize the new lands. The story goes that in the 1230s, the tribes led by Grand Duke Mindaugas managed to resist the Teutonic Knights' invasion and established the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, which would soon become a powerful European kingdom, especially as it conquered vast territories encompassing land in modern-day Belarus, Ukraine, and parts of Western Russia. Yet its conflicts with Moscow would see the beginning of its decline, as Moscow increasingly chipped away at its conquered lands. The mutual threat of the Teutonic Knights would draw Lithuania closer to Poland, which culminated in 1386 when Lithuania and Poland formed a personal union. This later evolved into the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth in 1569, after the devastating Livonian War had threatened the annexation of Lithuania by Moscow. The Commonwealth was one of the largest and most populous regions of Europe during the 16th and 17th centuries, encompassing not only present-day Poland and Lithuania, but also parts of Belarus, Ukraine, Latvia, and Russia. However, the end of the 18th century marked a period of decline for the Commonwealth, culminating in the partitions by Prussia, Russia, and Austria. These partitions, carried out in 1772, 1793, and 1795, effectively erased the Commonwealth from the map of Europe. The lands that currently form Lithuania were primarily absorbed by Russia. This marked the beginning of a period of intense Russification and attempts to suppress Lithuanian culture and language. Despite these efforts, the Lithuanian spirit remained resilient, setting the stage for the country's eventual fight for independence throughout the 20th century. Lithuania found its opportunity to declare independence on February 16, 1918, amidst the turmoil of World War I. This occurred in the aftermath of the collapse of the Russian and German empires. It would take until the signing of the Treaty of Versailles on June 28, 1919 for Lithuania's sovereignty to be acknowledged on a global scale. During this time, Lithuania also faced territorial disputes with Poland and Russia, leading to the brief Lithuanian Wars of Independence, a series of conflicts that took place from 1918 to 1922. Poland claimed historical and cultural ties to Lithuania and viewed Vilnius as an integral part of its territory, going as far as occupying the city in 1920. In 1923, the League of Nations intervened in the region's affairs, aiming to establish a lasting peace. As a result Lithuania's borders were redrawn without Vilnius. For centuries, Vilnius had been a bone of contention between Poland and Lithuania, a place both nations considered an integral part of their respective identities. At the time, however, the Allied powers, particularly France, supported Poland's claim to Vilnius, and they wanted Poland as a buffer zone against Bolshevism. The loss intensified the sense of national injustice and fueled a deep-seated resentment towards Poland. But as you know, peace didn't last long in Europe. Interestingly, in 1934, Lithuania became the first country to take action against the Nazi Party by banning its organizations and arresting its leaders for planning an uprising in Lithuania. This crackdown led to the Neumann-Sass trial, which lasted from 1934 to 1935 and resulted in the imprisonment of 87 individuals. Simultaneously, Lithuania's president Smetona referred to Hitler as a dangerous political madman. However, pressure from other Allied nations caused Smetona to pardon most of those convicted in the trial. On August 23, 1939, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact would largely seal the fate of Lithuania, as Germany and Russia carved up Europe in their respective spheres of influence, kicking off World War II. Initially, Lithuania would reluctantly sign a mutual assistance treaty with the Soviets, that resulted in the Soviets gifting Vilnius to Lithuania, which they had gained in their invasion of Poland. However, the Soviets would fully occupy Lithuania the following year, quickly establishing a communist regime, suppressing political opposition and implementing collectivization policies, which resulted in the seizure of private property. However, the initial Soviet occupation was short-lived, as in 1941, Germany launched a surprise attack on the Soviet Union known as Operation Barbarossa. Following this, Lithuania was occupied by German forces who initially presented themselves as liberators from Soviet oppression. However, it soon became clear that the Nazis had their own agenda, wishing to absorb their newly conquered lands and to cleanse the population. The genocide rate of Jews in Lithuania was between 95 and 97%. The highest in Europe. This was primarily due to widespread Lithuanian cooperation with the German authorities. Jews were widely blamed for the previous Soviet regime and were resented for welcoming Soviet troops. Targeted Nazi propaganda further exploited the anti-Soviet sentiment and strengthened the already present anti-Semitism. Before the Holocaust, Lithuania was home to about 210 to 250,000 Jews, having been called by Napoleon as the Jerusalem of the North. After World War II, the defeat of Nazi Germany resulted in the Soviet Union annexing Lithuania and incorporating it into the Soviet Socialist Republic. As Soviet political repression intensified in the following years, a large number of partisans from the Baltics, including Lithuania, sought refuge in the countryside and began an anti-Soviet insurgency. At least 10,000 in Estonia, 10,000 in Latvia, and 30,000 in Lithuania, also known as the Forest Brothers. They used guerrilla warfare tactics. They relied on the support of local communities who provided them with food, shelter, and information. The insurgency lasted for several years, with sporadic fighting occurring in the forests and rural areas of the Baltics, most notably in Lithuania. The Soviet forces launched military campaigns to suppress the partisans, using tactics such as forced deportations, mass arrests, and brutal interrogations. The insurgency gradually declined in the late 1940s and early 1950s as the Soviet forces gained the upper hand, and the partisans faced increased difficulties in sustaining their operations. The Communist Party's authority was unquestioned, and any opposition or dissent was swiftly crushed, while the Lithuanian political and intellectual elite were targeted, purged, and imprisoned. The Soviet secret police operated ruthlessly to suppress any potential resistance or nationalist sentiment. Soviet policies aimed at centralizing Lithuania's economy led to the collectivization of agriculture and the nationalization of industries. Forced collectivization disrupted traditional rural communities and led to a decline in agricultural productivity. The centrally planned economy prioritized the needs of the Soviet Union, often at the expense of Lithuania's own development. Soviet authorities sought to assimilate Lithuania. Its language was also marginalized, and Russian became the dominant language of education and administration. Cultural institutions were controlled and censored, restricting artistic and intellectual freedom. However, the Soviet Union's iron grip began to lighten with the arrival of Mikhail Gorbachev, who, in his attempt to revive the economy, introduced glasnost, openness, and perestroika, restructuring. Gorbachev's political agenda went for great and deep changes. He invited the Soviet public into open and public discussions unseen before. For the Soviet Lithuanian dissidents and activists, it was a golden opportunity, not to be missed, to bring their movements from underground into public life. On August 23, 1987, the Lithuanian Liberty League organized the first public protest rally that did not result in arrests. Encouraged by this, a group of 35 intellectuals organized the Sąjūdis reform movement with the original goal of supporting, discussing, and implementing Gorbachev's reforms. Yet short of openly supporting independence from the USSR, Sąjūdis grew in popularity, attracting large crowds to rallies and therefore radicalizing its agenda, taking advantage of Gorbachev's passiveness. In 1989, the independence movement in Baltic states, including Sąjūdis, organized an event called the Baltic Way. This event aimed to raise global awareness about their desire for independence and to show solidarity amongst the three nations. A human chain spanning over 600 kilometers, linking Tallinn, Riga, and Vilnius was created, consisting of over 2 million people. At this time, the Baltics consisted of less than 8 million people. 7 months later, Lithuania declared independence on March 11, 1990. It was the first post-Soviet nation to do so, and it wouldn't go unnoticed.
In a move reminiscent of past Soviet leadership, Moscow today launched a military crackdown in the Baltic Republic of Lithuania in an attempt to stop the drive for independence there.
In the chilling winter of 10th and 11th of January 1991, Soviet forces began their intrusive march into Vilnius. The Lithuanian parliament made an appeal to the citizens of Lithuania to stand guard over key buildings, including the parliament, radio, and television stations. The response was overwhelming as Lithuanians from all walks of life rallied to protect their institutions. Sunday, January 13th was the most intense day of the standoff. As the clock struck midnight, an ominous rumble of military vehicles echoed through the city. A column of tanks and armored personnel carriers emerged from a nearby military base. The destination was the Lithuanian radio and television tower. It was a systematic assault on the very heart of Lithuania's yearning for independence. But the people's determination was unwavering, the pursuit of liberty resolute. In the end, 14 Lithuanians lost their lives, and over 600 were injured. Until these events, Gorbachev had been seen in the West as a reformer who might bring peace between the East and West, as he had ordered the Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan, as well as giving its East European satellite states freedom to choose their path. Yet his actions towards Lithuania revealed his dark side, while dividing the West on whether to support Lithuanian independence or Gorbachev's reforms. In August 1991, a failed coup attempt against Gorbachev by hardline Soviet officials further weakened the Soviet Union's grip on power. This event, coupled with the determination of the Baltic states, expedited the process of independence. In the months following the coup attempt, the remaining Soviet republics, including Estonia, Latvia, Ukraine, and others, followed Lithuania's lead and declared independence. The Soviet Union, facing an inevitable disintegration, could no longer maintain control over its satellite states. And on December 25, 1991, the Soviet Union officially dissolved, and the newly independent countries emerged from its shadow. Lithuania's bold declaration of independence from the Soviet Union in 1990s had set a precedent for others to follow, effectively opening the floodgates to the eventual collapse of the Soviet regime. The country has undergone a process of democratization and transition to a market economy since its independence in 1990. Lithuania became a member of the European Union and NATO in 2004, solidifying its integration into the Western world. In terms of political stability, Lithuania has established a parliamentary democracy with regular elections and a multi-party system. The country has witnessed several changes in government, but overall it has maintained a relatively stable political environment. Economically, Lithuania has experienced rapid growth and modernization. The government implemented market-oriented reforms, privatized state-owned enterprises, and attracted foreign investment. As a result, Lithuania has become one of the fastest-growing economies in the European Union. The country has a strong focus on sectors such as information technology, finance, manufacturing, and services. The integration of Lithuania into the EU has facilitated the free movement of goods, services, and people, further boosting economic development. The country has been a strong advocate for democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. Lithuania has also contributed to international peacekeeping missions and has played an active role in the EU's decision-making processes. The country has a well-developed education system with high literacy rates and a strong emphasis on science and technology. By being sandwiched between Belarus and the Russian enclave of Kaliningrad, Lithuania has felt the impact of the Russian-Ukraine war acutely. The reason for this is simple. The Suwalki Gap, the 80-kilometer stretch of southern Lithuania between Russian Kaliningrad and the Belarusian border, has been a strategic weakness for Lithuania ever since its independence from the Soviet Union, especially as the heavily militarized Kaliningrad could have enough firepower to cut off Lithuania from Poland, and as such, the rest of Europe. Despite Lithuania's entry into NATO, this strategic vulnerability remains the primary problem for NATO's Baltic strategy. It is due to this gap that Lithuania had an interest in Belarus in 2020, when fraudulent elections resulted in widespread protests in the country and Lukashenko was re-elected. Should Lukashenko's regime in Belarus be toppled, Lithuania could breathe more easily, as it would add over 300 kilometers between the Suwalki Gap and the Russian military, which has the permission to traverse Belarus at any time. In addition to this, Lithuania would be a vocal critic of Lukashenko's regime, resulting in gradually increased tensions between the two countries. When a flight from Athens to Vilnius was hijacked by Belarusian government to imprison a Belarusian opposition activists, Lithuania would be swift to ban any flights to and from the country from flying over Belarus. Tensions between the two countries would reach their height when an influx of migrants from the Middle East and Africa began entering through Belarus in 2021. Lithuania accused Belarus of orchestrating the influx and would demand compensation. In response to these developments, the Lithuanian government has attempted to fortify its borders, although security issues persist. Fears of a potential Russian invasion have caused residents in border towns to relocate, seeking safety and better work opportunities elsewhere. Moreover, in April 2023, Lithuanian MPs passed amendments restricting citizens from Russia and Belarus from entering the country, citing Belarus's support for Russia as justification. This move has attracted criticism from Belarusian opposition groups, highlighting the complex balance Lithuania has to maintain between security and its liberal values. Following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the country accommodated over 73,000 Ukrainian refugees, demonstrating its commitment to human rights and international solidarity. Lithuanian Minister for Foreign Affairs has expressed concern about the slowdown in Western support for Ukraine and emphasized the need for urgent and continuous aid to ensure victory. The country's total military, humanitarian, and financial assistance to Ukraine is reported to be approximately 1 billion euros. To put it into perspective, this substantial amount equates to 1.42% of Lithuania's gross domestic product for the year of 2022. As a percentage of GDP, Lithuania's support for Ukraine is the third largest amongst all countries, only beaten out by the other Baltic states of Estonia and Latvia. Lithuanians, as before, are standing up for freedom, human rights, and the maintenance of a united and peaceful Europe. In November 2021, Lithuania took a bold step in the face of People's Republic of China. They allowed Taiwan to establish a new representative office in Vilnius, an act seen as a major affront to China. The office was named the Taiwanese Representative Office, a departure from the usual Taipei Representative Office used elsewhere, which further fueled the controversy. China's response was swift and severe. Beijing downgraded its diplomatic presence in Lithuania, and unofficial trade sanctions were imposed, blocking most Lithuanian exports to China. Lithuanian diplomats in China were also evacuated following a revocation of their diplomatic status. The trade restrictions imposed by China on Lithuania would result in Taiwan coming to the rescue. For example, Taiwan pledged to establish a $200 million fund to invest in Lithuania and open up its markets to the Baltic nation in reaction to economic pressure from China. It also purchased 2,400 bottles of Lithuanian rum, originally destined for China before China's trade restrictions. Lithuania's standoff with China has underscored the inherent risks of economic ties with authoritarian regimes. Other EU countries, especially Germany, which is heavily dependent on trade with China, face a significant challenge in balancing economic interests and shared democratic values. Lithuania's actions have sparked a broader conversation within the EU on the need for economic diversification and a more united stance against perceived bullying by authoritarian states, whether it be China or Russia. Lithuania's defiance of China has coincided with an enhanced relationship with Taiwan. The two countries have exchanged multiple business and diplomatic missions, and Taiwan has even established a substantial fund to invest in Lithuania and other Central and Eastern European nations. A key aspect of the Lithuania-Taiwan relationship is the potential partnership in the semiconductor industry. Lithuania hopes to become a part of the supply chain, a move that could significantly boost its economic potential and geopolitical significance in the face of Chinese aggression. As of now, the Sino-Lithuanian standoff remains unresolved. While Lithuania has refused to back down, China continues to block Lithuanian goods at its customs. However, the EU's reaction and support have helped Lithuania weather the storm, underscoring the power of unity in facing authoritarian regimes. Lithuania has remarkably cast a towering shadow on history. Once absorbed into one of the grandest empires in Europe, it has now emerged as a beacon of democratic values and freedom. The nation's tenacious journey towards independence echoes in its support for Ukraine's autonomy from Russia and Taiwan's separation from China. Evidently, Lithuanians exhibit an indomitable spirit, displaying readiness to confront any adversary in the pursuit of liberty and independence. Next, if you wish to learn a bit more about Lithuania's historical alliance with Poland and its history with Russia, I recommend watching my video on the Polish-Russian Wars. And this is my Patreon map. Everyone on this map is a legend. Thank you guys so much for your support. Geoperspective out.